today we are looking at section 5.1, and we are going to be looking at nth roots of numbers. So as far as the vocabulary goes, when we talk about the nth root of a, that is written this way: nth root of a. The index of the radical, n is going to be the index. So we could have, if there's no number there, then it's going to be 2 as the index. It's the square root. But if we have a 3 there, the index is 3, 4 there is 4th root, and then the index is 4. So taking a look here, if we're trying to find the nth real roots of a number, and if this root that we're taking is greater than 1 and a is a real number, whenever n is an even integer and a is less than 0, we're going to have, there's no real nth roots. What that's saying is I can't take the square root of a negative number, okay? I can't take the square root of negative 16 and get a real number. So that means our a value is less than 0, can't do it. Well, what about if under this radical is equal to 0? Well, the square root, the cube root, the 4th root, any root of 0 is just 0. If this a value is greater than 0 and we have an even integer, we would say that there are going to be 2 real nth roots. Now, the wording is going to look different. So this would be like down here, if I asked you to find the 4th root or roots of 16. That means we're going to have 2 solutions. One of our solutions would be 2, and that's because 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is going to give us 16, but the other one is also going to be negative 2, and that's because negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 is going to be 16. So these would both be our 4th roots of 16, but that's just because of the wording. If I had just said to find, if it was written like this, we don't say that the answer to this is 2 and negative 2. The answer to this, we use the principal root, and that's just 2. The only time we have to worry about whether it's positive or negative is when it's written like this in words. Well, what about if n is an is an odd integer? Well, if a is greater than 0, we're going to have 1 nth root. If a is equal to 0, we're going to have 1 real nth root, and it's going to be 0. If a is less than 0 back here, we have 1. And if a is greater than 0, then we're going to have 1 as well. Let's go down here and take a look at what we're talking about. So if we're taking the 3rd root of 27, that's just going to be 3, because 3 to the 3rd is 27. If I'm taking the 3rd root of negative 8, though, that's only going to have one solution. It's a negative 2, and that's because negative 2 to the 3rd is negative 8. If I'm doing the 4th roots of negative 16, I can't do that. There's no solution to that. And that's because we're trying to take the 4th root and we have this negative number. That has no real, let's even say it that way, that has no real solution. Okay, so we do not have any real roots for negative 16. And that's because a is negative. So there are no real nth roots. All right, let's come over here now. And we have to understand what this notation means. N is going to be the root. The number on the top is going to be the power. In this case, the power is just 1. So if I'm doing this problem, 2 is the root, 3 is the power. This means take the square root of 9. That answers 3. Now we have 3 to the 3rd power, and that's 27. That's the way we do that kind of thing. Now this one would be saying we're taking the 4th root of 16, we're just finding that principal root, that's 2, and then the top number's the power. 2 to the negative 3rd means 1 over 2 cubed, and so this would be 1 over 8. Alright, now look back here again. It's saying find the indicated real nth root of a. Well, this means I'm taking the cube root of negative 125. That is going to be negative 5. If I'm taking the square root of negative 400, what do you think that is? Right, there is not one. There's no real root for that. On this one, if I'm taking the 6th root of 64, I have to think what number multiplied by itself 6 times is going to give me 64, and that's going to be 2. But because of the way it's written, because they're asking us to find the indicated real nth root or roots, my answer here would also be negative 2. And that's because negative 2 to the 6th is also going to be 64. If you want to check that on your calculator, watch this. If I do negative 2 raised to the 6th, see how that gives me 64? So that works. A lot of times people are like this. They put it in this way. Well, that's not going to give you the right answer. This is doing 2 to the 6th and then putting a negative in front of it. That is not how you check that answer. The other way you can do this is you can go under math and you can go down here under number 5. And this is asking you, what do you want your root to be? And we're saying the 6th root of 64, and it gives us 2. But that would only be if we were allowed to use our calculator. All right, evaluate these without using a calculator. At this point, you should pause the video and try these on your own, and then come back and look at, see if you got them correct. I'm going to go through these very quickly. So again, pause the video, try it on your own. This is the square root of 64, 8. This is the cube root of negative 27, negative 3. This is the 5th root of 32. Well, I have to know that's 2. And then 2 to the 7th. I know that's going to be like this. So the way I can do that, I know that is 8. I know that is 8. So 8 times 8 is 64, and then times 2 more would be 128. This is the square root of 49, that's 7. 7 to the negative 3, that's going to be 1 over 7 cubed. And 7 to the 3rd, that's going to be 49 times 7. That's going to be 200. What is that one? It's going to be 147. No, it's not. 143. Okay, on this one, we've got the 5th root of negative 32. That's going to be negative 2. Negative 2 to the 3rd is negative 8. This one is the cube root of 1,000. That's 10. 10 to the negative 2 is 1 over 100. The 4th root of 81, that's going to be 3. 3 to the 3rd is 27. The 4th root of 625, you need to know that one. That's 5. And then it's 5 to the 1st, and so that's just 5. Okay, at the end here, we're supposed to match the equivalent expressions. We don't have to explain our reasoning. This means the square root of a to the 3rd power. That's what that one means, the square root of a to the 3rd. So I'm going to find that. That matches up there. This is going to be negative a, and then the power is 1 and the root is 3. So that's going to be negative a to the 1/3. That's going to be that one. Here's my root, here's my power. So my power goes on top, the root goes on bottom. And then on this one, my power is 1 and my root is 3, but because it's in the denominator, it'd have to be a negative. All right, find the real solution or solutions. Round to 2 decimal places when appropriate. This one's pretty easy. We divide both sides by 6. We get this. We have to take the cube root of both sides in order to solve. So the cube root of negative 1 is negative 1. This one we would divide by 2 first. Now we have to take the 4th root of both sides. Okay, there is no 4th root of 64 that's exact. So I'm going to go to my calculator. I'm going to go under math. I'm going to go down here to number 5, and I'm going to do the 4th root of 64. And there's my answer on that. So I'm just going to keep that there for a minute. The 4th root of x plus 5 to the 4th is just x plus 5. And then I'm going to have, because this is an even root and it's an equation, I actually have to put plus or minus 2.828. It says 2 decimal places, but we're always going to go 3. And so from this answer, I'm going to have to subtract 5 to get x by itself. And this is an approximation. And then my other answer is going to be this one, but it's the negative of that. So I'm going to have to multiply it by -1. Okay, so I want negative of this, and then I would have to subtract 5. And those are my two approximate solutions to that. On number 18, I'd have to add 32. And I have x to the 5th equals -32. I have to take the 5th root. If I'm taking the 5th root of a negative number, that's going to be negative. And you should know that 2 to the 5th is 32. And so this is going to just be -2. If you didn't know it, you could use your calculator, but you're going to have to know those common roots. Okay, on this one, I can go ahead and take over the 100. And I can multiply both sides by -10 to get all this to become just x cubed. A negative times a negative is going to give me a positive 1,000. And then what's the cube root of 1,000? And that's going to be just one positive answer, and that's 10. So remember, back here we had an equation. We were taking an even root right here in order to solve it. When we take that even root, it's going to be plus or minus. Okay, and then the last thing here, the volume of a cube is 1,728 cubic inches. What are the dimensions of the cube? So we're talking about this. It's a cube, which means that every side is the same. To find volume, we do area of the base times the height. So x squared times x is going to give us x cubed, has to equal this. That's all we have to do. We have to take the cube root. I don't expect you to know that cube root. So we're going to go under math, and we do also have just a cube root button, number 4. And the cube root of 1,728 is 12. And so the dimensions of the cube are 12. I'll tell you, on the ACTs a lot of times they'll give you this information, and then they would say something like, what is the surface area of the cube? Would you know how to find the surface area of the cube? Remember, each face is going to be 12 times 12, which would be 144, and then how many faces do we have? 6. So if they had asked that question, we get 864. But that's not what was asked, it was just that. Alright, remember guys, when you're watching video notes, you need to be actively learning. You can't just sit here and watch the video. You have to actually pause it, try some things on your own. Things you don't understand, you have to go back and rewatch.